Hold on a minute. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. We are back. We are live. We are in the studios. And just want you to know it's WBDM, Vaughn Digital Media, bringing you the best of the 757 Community Talk Show. And today is Thursday. And you know what time it is. It's GA for Justice. And I'm bringing you the one and only. That community activist is always out there, getting engaged with the community and the people of the leadership of Virginia Beach, and none other than the one and only Miss Georgia Allen. How you doing?
I'm doing good. You put him on a week early. You put that face up a week early.
No, I put that up there because you was on. I gotta get another picture with you solo. But
look, it's okay. It's okay. I'm excited about today. We got a very special guest, but let me do as I always do. I always kick it off and tell you a little bit about the topic of the show and give you some opening greetings. So hello, everybody. And yes, it's Thursday, and I'm so excited. Today's topic is, as always, vote, vote, vote. But it's civic engagement, policy, and progress. We need to find out a little bit about, one, getting civically engaged. Also, let's talk about policy a little bit today. And also, are we progressing as we're making policy or changing policy? Our KWANZAA principle is KUJICHAGULIA, to define ourselves, name ourselves, create for ourselves, and speak for ourselves. And never, ever, ever, ever allow others to define us, name us, or speak for us. Our faith message is from Proverbs 6:9. A person plans his course, but the Lord directs his steps. And so today, as we're going to be talking about engagement and civic engagement and policy and progress, it's important to recognize that we might plan a course, but if we're in our faith, we're going to get direction. And that's definitely what we want to have, is direction. So again, it is Thursday, and I am Georgia F. Allen with GA for Justice. As always, I want to first and foremost thank Mr. Henderson Vaughn, aka Captain 85, aka the Dream Maker, on the one and only WVDM, who has opened up the airwaves to bring our listening audience a simple conversation for information, a conversation for correction when necessary, as well as a conversation for transformation. Because we don't want things to stay the same. We want to move forward. My disclaimer, as always, many of you may be well aware that I have worked in civil rights. I have been actively involved in the community for decades. Therefore, the various positions that I may take are mine and mine alone. I do not speak on behalf of any groups or any organizations. And with that said, I want to introduce our special guests. We are very excited to have Mr. Chris Taylor, who is going to be talking with us about civic engagement, talking with us about policy, talking with us about progress. And Mr. Taylor is the Honorable Chris Taylor, is the sixth generation in his family to have grown up in the Little Neck, Kings Grant area of Virginia Beach. Chris attended Lynn Haven Middle School and then First Colonial High School. He was a member of the 2002 Boys Basketball City Championship team. And that's kind of unusual because First Colonial don't usually get those props. But we'll let you have that one, Chris. In 2006, Chris graduated from Virginia Wesleyan University with a degree in business management. He was a member of the 2005 men's basketball ODAC Conference Championship team. Chris is married to his wonderful, lovely wife, and yes, I know Kimberly Taylor, and they have 3 wonderful children. Chris and Kim have a passion for kingdom business and service to others. Together, they own and operate Smoothie Stop Cafe. And we're going to let him talk a little bit about being a business owner along with civic engagement and how sometimes those things intermix. Okay. So with that being said, I want to welcome the Honorable Chris Taylor, a former city council members here in the city of Virginia Beach. Hello, Chris.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vaughn and Miss Allen. Thank you for having me today. What a wonderful introduction. I feel humbled.
Oh, look, we're just glad to have you because you've talked to me long enough. So you know I enjoy different voices. I don't want us all walking to the same plain music. I want different voices because if we don't have different voices, then we only need one person in the room, right?
Amen.
We only need one person in the room. So I want to hear from other people. And I want to hear positions about things from other people. And I don't get shy about that. I know there are people out here who are so married to certain positions or so married to certain political ideology that they can't find places to be able to look beyond that. So with that being said, we want to make sure that we talk a little bit about our city, the city of Virginia Beach. Both of us have been here for decades, and we know that there's been a lot of changes going on right here in our city. So talk to us a little bit about serving in city government and some of the things that take place that maybe the average person may not know or may not understand. So kind of share some of that information with us.
All right. Well, thank you, Georgia. I think you brought up a good point. A lot of times, especially in the Black African-American community, it is small business or the commerce that leads us into politics or public service. For us, we were the first, Kimberly and I and our families, to be entrepreneurs, the first to start a business. And as you can imagine, with the 1924 Racial Integrity Act right here in Virginia, my mom and her sisters, their only option being born in the early 50s was to go to school and hopefully get a good job and build something for their family. So they weren't willing to necessarily take that risk to start a business. And so when we started Smoothie Stop, we had expanded pretty rapidly to 6 locations. We have 3 in Virginia Beach. And one day someone walked into our Laskin Road location and they said, hey, there's a guy running for governor. He wants to come in your store, do a little thing. I said, what, is he looking for a Black guy that owns a business? And believe it or not, the individual actually said yes. And as a believer, I said, well, at least you're honest. Send them in. And so that led to then candidate Glenn Youngkin, Winsome Sears, and Jason Myers coming into our Smoothie Stop. Clarence Neely, it wasn't all partisan. It wasn't all Republican. They came in. We did a kind of a meet and greet. And that was kind of my introduction to really politics. And as we moved forward, I kind of got my feet wet and decided instead of just sitting on my couch arguing with the TV and complaining, I would step up. And I did. I stepped up and ran for city council in 2022 in District 8, formerly Lynn Haven. I do not believe they had ever had a minority represent them. And we were successful, all glory to God. And that opened up the door to not just running, but now serving. And I got to tell you, so many people are really unfamiliar with, the process. And then once you win, what that looks like. In a manager council form of government, we are the board, legislative body, but our CEO is the city manager, Patrick Duhaney, and he runs the day-to-day. So I think it's important for your viewers to understand and those engaged in their civic duty that in the city of Virginia Beach, with so many people moving here and the military coming from all over the world, all over the country, we're not in a strong mayor system. And so oftentimes I would have to educate my constituents that I didn't have the power, nor did the mayor, to do anything outside of an agreement and working with our city manager. So I think that's very important in the city of Virginia Beach to understand, even with this Mount Trashmore Carnival cancellation. That was not a council decision. That wasn't even a Mayor Bobby Dyer decision. It was the city manager working with his staff to make a decision and then taking that to his board of directors, which I think is kind of backwards, but nonetheless, that's what happened. And then that decision was made. So I think it's very important for your viewers to understand your first stop is probably the city manager's office, and your next stop should be either the mayor or your council representative, because between those 3 individuals, that's where your decisions are being made.
That's very interesting because for so long, we have a tendency to talk to the mayor. We have a tendency to talk to the council members, and rarely do we sit down with city manager. And having heard it directly from someone who served on council, to the listening audience, keep that in mind when you're looking at, okay, I want to take a look at certain policies, which we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And I'm going to mention a couple of things that I know from personal experience that has taken place in the city of Virginia Beach. And we want someone to kind of share with the audience about policy and policy making, because people don't understand. There's a difference. There's a lot of policy out there, but it doesn't ever make it to the final finish line. And so with that being said, for me personally, we fought for fair representation for decades. We even had a referendum on the ballot years ago. The referendum passed with regards to voting. And, you know, the city council or the city manager, more likely, it was very much a city manager decision saying, but I don't want that. But we don't hear that. We just hear who's in front of the camera for the most part. And the city manager kind of sits on the side. And so when we fought for fair district, we went to the General Assembly. We followed what we thought were the processes. We went before our council first, went before the General Assembly, ultimately went to the referendum, got the referendum passed, and then the General Assembly members said, I don't know if I like this. I might not be able to get as many people on council as I want with this election system that looks more fair. And so they changed the wording of the referendum. And the next time around, guess what? The members of the residents in the cities, the residents of the city ended up voting against what they had originally voted in favor of, simply because of wording on the referendum. Well, we're now back to a similar situation again. Members of the community, two women decided that, you know what, we don't like the voting system, so we're going to sue you guys. And so two women in Virginia Beach decided that they would sue the city of Virginia Beach on their violation of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, took it to federal court. And the federal judge said, you're absolutely right. These guys have not followed the 1965 Voting Rights Act since its inception. Now, while Virginia Beach became a city in 63, Voting Rights Act became law of the land 2 years later. And they still never put it in place. And so ultimately, the team won the lawsuit. The judge ruled in their favor and changed how we vote here. And you, during that period of time, was elected in a single member district versus the full at-large district system that we had in the past. So talk a little bit about how voting and how drawing of districts can have an impact on disparate communities, marginalized communities, and things of that nature.
So thank you for sharing that background, and thank you for the work you did. It is God's work. And oftentimes I know we don't get thank you, but we'll get it from him. So good job. And thank you for representing your generation that went before you and those that have come after you. And one of my favorite quotes from the book of Summer Meditations is about genuine politics. And it says that politics worthy of name and the only politics I'm willing to devote myself to is simply a matter of serving those around us, serving the community, and serving those who will come after us. Its deepest roots are moral because it is a responsibility. And that's Václav Havel. It's important for people to understand that are in Virginia. Remember, many people in this conversation aren't from here. Having my mom's side, which was indigenous, that mixed with Black, you'll hear me continue to talk about the 1924 Racial Integrity Act in Virginia, which made it so you could only be Black or white. If you were from Israel, if you were immigrating from Germany, if you were immigrating from Ireland, Italian, it didn't matter. You were white. That didn't go away until 1969, 1970. off of the books where the Supreme Court had to come in. So for Virginians that live here, it's much different. So when you talk about running for office in Virginia Beach as a minority, it was very challenging for many reasons. For one, think about the majority of our districts. Think about the amount of money you have to raise. I remember early on, Georgia, going to meet with the late Lewis Jones, God bless his soul. And I was confident. I knew God was leading me to run, but he set me down in his funeral home in his office with urns behind him. It was pretty dark. And he told me, I like you, kid, but I'm going to spend $200,000. He said it's already to the side. I don't have to go raise it. And he said, I'm going to leverage all of my friends and colleagues. So when they knock doors, they'll be handing out my material instead of your material, and you don't have a chance. And I told him, I appreciate you sharing all that information, but I'm still going to run. So just let's pause right there. Think about that. In an at-large system, regardless of your race, let's look at the money piece. If you have incumbents and individuals that have 30, 25 years of relationships and experience, and they're able to leverage that to impact voting rights and your ability to campaign, that's why we didn't see many new people able to win. And so when the 10-1 was, and I decided to run well before it was decided we were going to do a 10-1. I had my faith in God. I'm a believer. And so he can do anything, and all things are possible with Jesus and God. And so when we ran, instead of having to campaign citywide, which I just did in my latest race for mayor, which was much more difficult, I raised the same amount of money. I was able to reach out to my neighbors, my friends, and talk to them directly. They knew my character. They knew who I was. And so all of the mailers that the Democratic candidate sent out, which was 8 or 9 mailers, I couldn't even compete with it. They outraised me by 10. They were just ignored. It didn't matter as much because these individuals for the first time could just vote for someone they knew, someone they went to school with, someone they went to the grocery store with, versus getting all these mailers and they don't know who the person is. They just go, well, he looks nice or she looks nice. And so that's the first thing the 10-1 system did, was it broke down the barrier of entry. And for minorities, again, I'm a second generation out of civil rights. My mother and them had to deal with it. My Aunt Sandy was the first African-American Black woman to receive a college scholarship at Virginia Tech Athletic in 1979. My mom's youngest sister. So I want you to think about that. And she went on to become a guidance chair, and her son, the second generation out, is now at UVA Law. That's a big deal. We
sound like you're about to do a Biden on us right now.
But I mean, these are the things that we don't talk
about.
These are the things we don't talk about, and it impacts our decisions. If you're, would I send my 30-year-old son to run for city council to earn $28,000 a year when we don't have our foundation set in terms of our finances, our structure, the home life, whereas a lot of our competitors who may be from a different demographic, they may be the 4th generation to have gone to college. So what you all fought for was leveling the playing field. In terms of the 10-1, in terms of campaigning, you still had to work, you still had to go out, but you didn't have to convince 400,000 people that you were decent or moral or wanted to work hard. You had to convince 44,000. And I think another key point to make is we have to realize in the city of Virginia Beach, we're not seeing 70 or 80% voter turnout. So that number, that 44,000 shrinks down to 30, 35,000, 28,000. So now you're trying to convince a majority of a smaller portion of the majority to vote for you with $10,000 or $20,000. And so it's not impossible, but what you all fought for was exactly what the courts have said. It's easy to dilute the vote, whether it's nefarious or evil motive, whatever you want to say your justification is, it's easier to dilute when you have 28% of your population, that's one, and they don't all live in the same community.
And you make an excellent point about that, because when you have a smaller pool, You don't have to work as hard, but you still have to work. If I'm trying to run in a citywide election, I got 272 miles of a city. That's a
Right.
pretty big. Whereas if
Mhm.
I'm running in a district, okay, that
Yeah.
drops the mileage substantially. And so if I don't have a lot of money, I can probably, what they say, hoof it,
Correct.
get my feet out there, and I can just go out there and I can go and knock doors and everything. But try knocking doors in a city with over 272 miles. Try knocking doors in a city of over 450,000 people. That's a big, big difference. And that is what, the two women saw when they was willing to put their name on the dotted line, because keep in mind, there were a number of people that could have put their name on that lawsuit, and many of them of all socioeconomic status, some quite well-to-do, and they were like, nope, I'm not going to do it. And so having people willing to say, you know what, we know this is not fair. And most of the people in the city knows it's not fair. And many of the people who voted for fair election, they're no longer here. So someone has to come behind them and say, I'm willing to fight. And so for that, it makes good sense. The thing that you said about the late Lewis Jones, about him telling you that about how much money he's going to put against you, about the resources, and not just resources, the people. Not just financial resources. We're talking people that have
Yes.
known him for decades, people who used his funeral home, people who were family of friends of his wife, who was the daughter of a former mayor of the city of Norfolk. So you and I,
and then think about, sign locations and, how many funeral homes he had. And again, it's not illegal. It's not nefarious, but it's they don't tell you this when you go, you know what, I think I want to run for office.
right.
And you don't know. And I left that day going, I really do need to put my faith and trust in God, because on the face of it, I mean, this looks impossible.
Exactly. So it kind of says, what did my scripture say? A person plans his course, but what? But the Lord directs his steps. So, it's important that we understand that when it comes to civic engagement. Let's talk about policy agenda. A lot of times we find that there are all of these different groups. Maybe they're the ministers, maybe they're civic organizations, maybe the NAACP or the Urban League. But how often do you see various groups actually present a policy agenda to their elected officials and say, this is what I like to see you get done? How often did you see that when you served?
It happens at the city level often, typically not on camera and not in front of the public. But look what's happening right now. And I was asked by Mayor Dyer when I was on council after the October 7th situation in Israel and Hamas to go to the Combat Anti-Semitism mayoral summit. And I attended in December of 2023 and then again last year in Beverly Hills. Look at the way the Jewish community has impacted policy surrounding anti-Semitism. I mean, when Governor Youngkin was elected, they were at the table signing. We were invited, but we didn't get that far. And then look at now how the policies that are being written up are impacting their community. My concern, and I've shared this with Jewish leadership, is I don't want to hear about 1968 and 69 when a few Jewish people marched with Martin Luther King and some of those. But when did anti-Semitism become the elevated hate? Are we only concerned about prejudice, bias, and hate if it's individuals that are Jewish? But that's an example of they've gotten to the ear of the policymakers. And again, I wasn't joking around when I said maybe we should have had Donald Trump in the 60s and the 70s, because how many anti-Black rallies were held on college campuses?
Exactly.
How many students had to have the National Guard escort them into school because their fellow students were throwing rocks at them? We should have defunded all of those colleges and institutions, but we didn't have that because we didn't have individuals that were concerned with that policy. At the local level, street namings, or you see monies going to certain organizations. I have nothing against the Neptune Festival, but within this year's budget, they received an additional $50,000 on top of the $500,000. Yet the Juneteenth run, which was only $10,000, was taken out of the budget. That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
But they were able, those groups, those special interest groups, are able to get to the ear of a certain number of people that are making the policy decisions. And then that impacts the entire community. And again, nothing against the Neptune Festival. But when you look at the diversity of the queens, the kings, the princesses, the Tritons, that doesn't reflect the city of Virginia Beach's demographic makeup. But
it's
the
our
policy
money.
Set, it's our money. And it's
our
your money,
money.
and it's District 10's money, and it's District 4's money, and it's every other minority that's paying taxes or going to restaurants or owns a business or owns a home. And so that's where we have to really come together as a community, capital C. And that's bigger than race, bigger than demographic, while at the same time focusing on the micro of our community. Again, I don't understand how within this budget, certain things pass, but CTAC still doesn't have their park. And that's because they don't have an ear, or no one's listening, that is very important. And so we could have done that 2 years ago. Why haven't we put the money forward? And so that goes back to really why I'm excited about being on your show today, is it's informing the public. If you don't know the name of your mayor, what district you live in, your city council member, and you have no clue who the city manager is, how do you effectively communicate what is important to you?
Excellent point. And again, it gets down to policy, but it also gets down to making sure that you have an ear to the decision makers. And a lot of times I find that there are people who are excited about being in the room. How do we help tap that down to move away from being excited to be in the room and focus more on being excited about changing the policies? Because I know I'm around people all the time. They haven't been around elected officials a lot. They haven't been in an environment where they're invited to certain events or what have you. And they get that invitation and they're like, oh man, I got invited to sit at the convention center for the State of the City address. Okay. And what in the State of the City
That's what I call political intrigue.
Affected was
Did you hear me? That's what I call
effect.
political intrigue.
Exactly. What in that address said there will be funding going to the Bayside area, to the Level Green area, College Park, to the Green Run area. What in that messaging said anything about any money being allocated to any of those interests within our community?
And you bring up a great point. I mean, again, think about it. That first introduction for us, we didn't know who Glenn Youngkin was. I had no clue who Winsome Sears was. Didn't know who Jason Mayeres was. I mean, he's a Cuban American, but just thought he wasn't a American based on that 1924 act. He doesn't, represent necessarily Cuban Americans. So for me, I got to watch how being invited to the governor's mansion while you're running and you're a benefit to the governor. But then when you get elected and he shows up and there's an EF3 tornado in your district and someone says, hey, Governor Youngkin, this is Chris Taylor. He goes, oh, I know the smoothie guy. Not the councilman, the smoothie guy, because political intrigue, we get excited to be in the room. But political intrigue is not politics. You're in the room, but you're not impacting that politician. They invite you, you get excited to take a picture, but do they return your email? Are you able to get a hold of them when you need something? When you have an issue, are they attentive or is it all based on that superficial politics? And I think we have to get away from the superficial and get to the meat of the issue, which is you represent my voice. And if my voice is not heard or you're unwilling to listen, then you really don't represent me. And that's one of the challenges. And one of the reasons I really stepped away and resigned, Georgia, was if the goal is to get to 6, instead of listening to the 300 people that came down here and told us why they didn't like the position we were taking, then we're no longer representing the people that voted for us. We're representing the people that have our ear. And I want you to think about it. If we're a body and 400 people come to us and say, it's not because we hate you, we're going to be respectful, we're going to be civil, but this is not the right thing to do. And we just roll our eyes, we don't listen, we're not engaged, we don't ask any questions because our mind's made up. Well, what is the point of sacrificing to serve?
That makes sense.
Because it doesn't do the constituent, the citizen, any good. And I dealt with this in District 8, an 87% white district. I didn't get elected because I was 6'5" and a Negro. It was
you may have. They may have like that basketball thing. Remember, they like us to bounce the ball. They like us to sing. They like us to dance. so that basketball may have been a
athletic intrigue. But we had two policy issues that came up, and I think you can you'll relate to this one. We had a church. It was the Cabrini House, and the church had a facility that they were renting out to Seton House, and they no longer wanted to rent it to Seton House, and they wanted to bring in migrant children through the Homeland Security, and it was their right. And they came to council for a conditional use permit. Now, keep in mind, those on the right, based out of political maneuvering, there's no way they could support that.
Right.
Those on the left were understanding of the situation. And I never forget, I walked into a town hall that I didn't call, armed security. 400 people came out to express their support and or concerns for this Cabrini House. And that's when it hit me as I was walking to this church. And I called my wife. I said, I've never seen this many cars in our neighborhood. And I listened to the people. And once we could get through the listening, I love James, be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. Sometimes we get so emotional on issues that we forget that it's still important. If we're going to collaborate and work together, we got to listen. And we realized the main concern for those wasn't the migrant children. It wasn't the church. It was having these minors that were 16 or 17 or 18 with younger children within the community that hadn't been vetted. And so what we did was we went and worked with the federal government to put a cap on the age of the children that would come to the home. And if they weren't siblings, we capped the males at 12 or 13 and the females. And so that alleviated the concerns. And we ended up getting a unanimous vote from people that said, I will not support this. But that took listening to the constituent, putting aside emotion, and finding out what is the policy we're looking at here. If we make this policy decision that based on emotion and bigotry and prejudice, that we're not going to allow people that own stuff to do what they want, well, what does that look like for the rest of the city?
Sounds pretty good. Well, that brings us to our break. And as I shared with you, I always like to do some announcements, acknowledgments, commemorations. And of course, many people know that on the 25th of May was the anniversary of the murder of George Floyd. So we want to acknowledge that because that was another person that we lost from our community. And we know that if anyone from our community is killed, especially by the police, they find everything wrong with that person and they find nothing that was good about that person. So they changed the makeup of who George Floyd was in the incident and cared nothing about the fact that they took the life of a father, a brother, and a mentor to many young people. Even though he had had problems in the past, he still mentored other young people to try to help them avoid a similar situation altogether. I also want to acknowledge Charles Rangel, former congressman of New York. He is now one of our ancestors. And I like him because he was a Gemini. He was born June 11, 1930, and he passed away on May the 26th. He was called the Lion of Lenox Avenue. And if you've ever been to Harlem, you've been down Lenox Avenue. He was a founding member of the CBC, Congressional Black Caucus. He fought for fair housing, urban revitalization, fair tax policies, equal opportunities for all Americans. And he served in the Korean War. He was awarded the Purple Heart and the Bronze Star. And he was the first African American to lead one of the most powerful committees in Congress, and that was the Ways and Means Committee. But he also followed the Honorable Reverend Adam Clayton Powell Jr., who was the former congressman from that area. We also want to acknowledge Malcolm X. I've been acknowledging Malcolm X all month long. While his birthday was May 19, 2025, Malcolm X would have been 100 years old this year on May 19. And so we don't ever want to forget those who have come before us. Also, we have a whole bunch. I mean, May was so full of birthdays. I was like, okay, I'm going to just yell them out real quick. Notorious Big, Johnny Gill, Naomi Campbell, Vivian Green, the late Paul Winfield. Okay, let me get the one right, because Paul was an actor. So I don't want to get him confused with the football player. Maxwell, Marvin Hagler, Scatman Crothers, Patti LaBelle. Patti LaBelle birthday was May 24, and she was 81 years old today. Hi, Patti. We also have birthdays of Gladys Knight. Gladys turned 80 this year. We have Michael Orr and Dr. Betty Shabazz, Malcolm X's wife. Her birthday was yesterday, May 28. So we had a tremendous amount of birthdays this month. But we also had a famous golfer named Ernest Eugene Dendy, and that's D-E-N-D-Y. Mr. Dendy was an American professional golfer, became the first Black golfer to win a major tournament in the United States. We also had Brown v. Board of Education, May 17, 1954, where we fought for the Equal Protection Clause. And then this was exciting as I was looking at things, because we forget about all the work that young people did. In Birmingham, Alabama, the Birmingham children had a crusade, a powerful protest against segregation. Just young people, little people. They called it a crusade, and I thought that was just absolutely phenomenal. And those are basically our announcements, but I do always want to make sure that people know it is election season. In Virginia, we have elections every year. Well, right now, we do have primary elections. And when you vote in primaries, you must ask for a Democrat or Republican ballot. They don't have everybody on the same ballot. You must vote either in the primary for the Democrats or the primary for Republicans. On the Democratic primary ballot, you have the lieutenant governor and the attorney general on the primary ballot. For the Republicans in District 97, which is for the House of Delegates, it is a competitive race. And when I say competitive, that just means you have an opponent, okay? Doesn't mean it's competitive because it's going to be tight or anything like that. It just means you got a competitive race. So if you live in the 97th district, you would have to ask again for a Republican ballot, and you would choose one of the two people that are on the ballot. Now that early and the primary race ends on Saturday, June the 14th, but the primary election, the actual election day, is June the 17th. So I hope everybody got that. This is for those who listen now or who listens later. We always try to provide you accurate information about what is going on in your local area, what is going on in the city of Virginia Beach. And then if it affects you in other places, if you are familiar in your city, there's a primary where you are, go to the polls and vote. Wherever you are, we want you to vote. If you don't have to be in Virginia to have a primary. So if there's a primary, because a lot of people think that, oh, well, I'm just going to go and vote in the general election. Well, the decision has already been made. They decided who's going to be the candidate for the Democratic Party and who's going to be the candidate for the Republican Party, and you had no input. So the primary is where the citizenry has an input as to who is going to be the standard bearer for their political party, unless those people do not have a primary candidate. So with that being said, we're going to, got any questions? Got anything you want to put out there since you formally ran? But I wanted to do that one last, just in case you wanted to say anything about primaries and elections and how important they are. Chris, are you on mute? I think he's frozen for a minute. But anyway, okay. With that being said, are you there? Is he frozen? You
just
also, okay. I think you may have muted both of you. Chris, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Chris? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and text him real quick. But anyway.
Well, he just dropped off.
Okay, he'll probably sign back in.
Yeah.
I'll just send him a quick message, sign back in. With that being said, we have a couple of other things that I wanted to talk about today. Possibility of legislative report cards. And that's when I say legislative, I mean on every single level, from school board to city council, to your state legislators, to your national legislators, how important it is for us to be tracking. Hi there, you back?
Yes, I don't know what happened.
Okay. I don't know how much you heard me say about voting and the importance of voting and everything. Did you get any of that? You did. Okay. Did you have anything to add to that, to the listening audience, about the significance of voting, especially in primary elections?
No, I think at the end of the day, we have to find a way to wake up the dormant goodwill in people. We have to get people back engaged, back excited about the local, the state, and the national government. When you look at this last election, it was very shocking the night after the election to see that over 14,000 people woke up, got dressed, went to the polls, voted for the national elections, and then ignored the local elections.
And in some cases, it was the opposite.
Budget is passed, buying food and going out locally is going to cost more. Stormwater fees are going to cost more.
Yeah,
depending on where you were, exactly.
Yeah, depending on where you were.
When you look at the.
Go ahead.
I didn't want to interrupt you. Are you speaking?
Oh no.
Okay.
No.
And then even if you look at the situation with the 10-1, it wasn't the local that got in the way. It was when it got to the state. And so the issues are married, even though some are more important locally. But people have to get out and vote. They have to educate themselves. If they don't know anything about the candidate, don't just say I'm blindly voting. I was at Wawa this morning, and I had a person tell me that you can't be a Christian and be a Democrat. And my response was, well, what about the hypocrisy on the right? And she said, well, I hold my breath when I vote for such and such. And I said, but that's not the same thing. You're a Christian. And so you shouldn't be holding your breath because that individual doesn't represent your interest, but you're calling Democrats who are not supportive of the ideas you have unchristian. I said, that right there disqualifies you as a Christian.
Correct.
You become the judge. And so we have to get to a place of civility where we realize everyone's voice matters. Yes, there's special influence. Yes, there's lobbying, but we have to not give up. I'm going back to school to better myself so that my children have an opportunity that's better. And I had a pretty good opportunity. I'm not going to say it was very troubling. Yes, there was racism. Yes, there were challenges. But compared to what my mother's generation went through, I can't complain. God's been good. But we have to wake up the people that have a genuine interest in serving. We have to get more local people on boards and commissions. We have to get more local people showing up to city council chambers, because when they don't see you show up, they don't think you care.
Right. And that is very important, that we get more people out. And you mentioned about the folks that are not voting. So what are some of your ideas about getting some of these people? Because there's a lot of people that are registered to vote. But then when it comes to election time, many of them don't come to the polls and vote, but they are registered. So what would be some of your recommendations in terms of, let's see how we can get people back to the polls and voting?
So I think it really begins back to the grassroots.
Okay.
So everyone's favorite radio station is WIIFM. What's in it for me? We all have issues that are very near and dear to us. I've seen post serving that people will call me and reach out because they think I'm still on city council, and they're frustrated, they're emotional, they have an issue in their neighborhood, and now they're ready to take action. Unfortunately, by the time there's an orange sign or you're pissed off, excuse my language, it's too late. Right. And so I've been encouraging these people to follow the agenda. It only takes 5 minutes to review the agenda. If it's not in your district or it doesn't relate to something that's important to you, you can pass it on. But imagine if we had 40 or 50% of our voting population in Virginia Beach understanding the city council agenda, understanding the importance of what's on the agenda, and then when it impacted them directly or their community, they didn't just ignore it, they spoke up. And people stay home when they don't think their voice is heard. And so I'm continuing to encourage people everywhere I go, let's get away from the Republican and Democrat at the local level. I understand we want to be partisan. I understand we want to pick our sides, but I've never seen a Republican pothole. I've never seen a Democratic school bus.
Right.
We have to get to the point where we realize we are stronger together. And if people will come together in knowledge and information and be informed, then they can approach these elected officials and their voice will be more powerful. We can't wait till the day of the vote.
Correct.
We have to let these elected officials know that I'm watching, not because I think you're doing anything wrong, but because I care. And then asking straight, direct questions. And one of the things I really like is there's never been a time where being direct and truthful harms anyone. Now, you may get offended, but we have to be direct and truthful with our elected representatives. And when they vote the way we support them, we can acknowledge that. But when they are voting in a manner that is completely against promises and commitments and what we feel, we have to let them know, not at the polls, but before we get to the polls. And if we can do that and get people caring again, then our community will be that much better. Otherwise, we're going to continue to see people stay at home and move away.
Now, I'm curious about two of the members on city council that the lawsuit directly affected, and both of them voted along with the majority, who who, regardless of how things are set up, they will always have a real opportunity to win and serve in the city of Virginia Beach. What are your thoughts regarding two people who are probably only on the city council because the lawsuit made it easier for them to run for office, made it less expensive for them to run for office, and put them in a position that was far more favorable than a citywide election. What do you think about that? How do you feel about that? Because what if your children decided they wanted to move into one of those districts? Yeah. Yeah, I can. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So I think it goes back to that radio station. You know, when you look at the emotional turbulence of a campaign and you perceive that certain people aren't supporting you in that district or that demographic group, it's easy to justify supporting something that you don't think is harmful, but you also don't upset the individuals or groups that have supported you. And that's why it's so important for us as a community, as a macro and then a micro, to understand donations matter. Finances matter. And so what I saw in that vote was a disregard for the reality that we had already done surveys. We had already rejected the opportunity to do a referendum in 23 and 24. And so for me, logically, it didn't make sense for either of those individuals to support the illusion of being politically connected versus actually having the ear of that representative. And again, without any judgment, where they needed to stand based on support. If you look at the District 8 councilman that replaced me, the promises he made during the campaign, why not vote against a budget that raises taxes, raises fees, cuts positions, when you know there's a majority that are going to support it? When I hear a district councilman from the oceanfront say, I don't like this budget, but I'm going to vote for it anyways. When do we get to the place where the spine, the moral compass, integrity, your word matters? And until voters hold these individuals responsible and accountable, then you're going to continue to see people vote even against their own interest. And that's the scary part for young people, is I see so many people voting against their own interest. And that's just doesn't make any sense to someone that believes, because we wouldn't send, I think the Bible says, even evil men give their sons good gifts. We don't want to be voting against things that help our community. And again, I know it's a tough seat to sit in, but that's why you have to, depend on that moral compass. And that's not talked about a lot in politics, but we got to get back to the meat of it. And that's your word, your commitment, and your duty to serve the community, not whoever writes the biggest check.
Right. Thank you. I'm going to make one last statement, and that is, I strongly feel that we need to be doing a check on our elected officials, and that's on all levels: a legislative report card. How are our city council members voting? How are our school board members voting? Are these votes helpful, or are they a hindrance? And so, to the listening audience, if there's anybody that want to volunteer and who loves numbers, who loves data, and like to track all of this stuff, we're looking for you. We're looking for people who are interested in local government, because I think, like Chris, I feel that all what do you call it? They say all things is local. All government is local. Everything about what we want starts at the local level, and then it moves up to the state and the national level. But all politics is local. And so with that being said, I want to turn it back over to you for final comments. Again, we have the Honorable Chris Taylor here, Today, he is a former council member here in the city of Virginia Beach. And our topic is civic engagement, policy, and progress. We didn't talk a lot about progress, did we? That means we got to bring you back, because we got to talk about what progress has been made. So with that said, go ahead and give us your closing comments, and then we'll close out the show.
Well, thank you, Dream Maker. Thank you, Georgia. The progress has been made. It's hard to see sometimes the progress, but when I look at my two children, my young boys that are 6 and 7, I can see that it's going to be better. And so we have to try to stay optimistic, for one. Number two, we have to continue getting informed and educated. You know the scripture, my people perish for a lack of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
When the vision is clear, people will run after it. Mm-hmm. And so we have to continue to encourage our young people, our middle-aged people, and even our older people to get involved, get active, not in a party, but in the government. And the government is not partisan. Our city manager doesn't care about Republican or Democrat. He has to get his budget passed, and they spend money. And so for your audience, if you're listening today, I want to leave you with 5 questions. Who is the mayor of our city? What district do you live in? Name your council member. Do you know the name of the city manager? And what form of government do we have? If you can get those 5 questions answered, then the next time you have an issue, you have 3 points of contact. The mayor who runs citywide, your council member that's in a district system that your vote matters, and the city manager who is appointed by the city council. That's half the battle to get to 6. Now, the manager doesn't vote, but he controls the agenda. And so we have to get informed to the point where when we have concerns, we don't go on Facebook or Instagram. We begin to engage with the individuals that are dutifully responsible for running our city. And if we can do that, our future is bright, because there will come a time where, as you said, we make our plans, God directs our steps. Mm-hmm. We serve a good God that doesn't like corruption, doesn't like deception, doesn't like false scales. But we have a part. James says, move close to me, I'll move close to you. Mm-hmm. Let's get the information and then come together, whether we agree or disagree, but we agree that our community is more important than any one person. And you helped me learn that lesson, Georgia. Our community as a whole is more important than any one individual. Mm-hmm. And that's what I leave you with. So thank you so much for the opportunity to share today, to listen, and to engage.
Thank you so much. Again, we had the Honorable Chris Taylor today to talk about civic engagement, policy, and progress. And so I hope today our listening audience understand this show is not about me. This show is about all of you, and it's about what is in the best interest of our community. And then what is the process that we're going to do to get to the best for our community. Again, taking a look at our local elected officials, taking a look at our city manager, taking a look at our mayor, and making sure that we're calling on them to do the work that they're responsible for doing. And with that being said, I am Georgia F. Allen. I'm with GA for Justice. Thank you so much for listening today. We look forward to seeing you next week. And thank you, Henderson, for opening up the airwaves so we have a place that we can come and share with our listening audience.
No doubt. Always a great topic. And thanks to your guest, the Honorable Chris Taylor, for coming on. And GA for Justice, you hit a home run again. So I'll try to get you a trophy sometime, with the bet. But don't forget to join in and tune in next week. And don't forget to share this with people on your social media platform. Hey, and you can even text it to them and let them know, hey, we need to engage more on this side of the track because election is coming and you have a choice to make the right choices. Until next time, this is GA for Justice with community activist Georgia Allen and guests. Thank you.